It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. And you know this, man, it's the only show that's so nice we do it twice. We record on Wednesday mornings, and then we'll post episode 1, which is half the games, right away on Wednesdays. And then really overnight, Wednesday night, but certainly Thursday morning, you'll have episode 2. The goal with this show is to help you guys set your lineups, whether that's season long or whether that's playing daily fantasy. Essentially, our guy John Daigle is a fountain, a treasure trove of information on the top fantasy players and really the fantasy relevant guys in each and every game. I'm a huge fan. I literally, if you ever see me looking down at all, it's because I'm taking notes for myself, really for the social media clips. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. We are at Ross Tucker Pod. He is at Not J Daigle. And I should mention, by the way, from time to time, you might see this show show up on some of the other feeds as part of the network and vice versa. So you might see other shows showing up on this feed as well as we make sure that more people get a chance to check out some of the other shows like the Fantasy Feast, College Draft, Even Money, and of course the flagship Ross Tucker Football Podcast, where, by the way, John, I thought Ed McCaffrey had some very interesting things to say about his son Christian on today's Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It certainly sounds like he'll be playing again this year. They're just trying to get this Achilles tendonitis calmed down as fast as they possibly can. You can check out John on social at NotJDaigle and all of his content, all the work for not only John, but guys like Adam Levitan, Evan Silva, who a lot of you know because he used to be the co-host of the Fantasy Feast, EstablishTheRun.com. The key, though, is to use the code FEAST so you get that discount, right? You want the information, you want the subscription, but get the discount, FEAST, at EstablishTheRun.com. 4 teams on buys this week. Lions, Chargers, Eagles, Titans, which means people need to know who to put in their lineups. We'll start with Thursday Night Football. It's the Falcons hosting the Bucs, John.
And we'll go a little deeper this week just to help out people pad for those bye weeks, starting with this one. And it is a matchup when you think about the stars in this game you'd like to be excited about, but I am worried that both defenses can capitalize here, beginning with the Falcons secondary allowing the 7th fewest yards per attempt so far. So for a player like Baker Mayfield, who has really only struggled against the Broncos defense, which, by the way, every quarterback has struggled against the Broncos defense this year, I think it does push him out of the top 12, where that series typically been this season. Not only that, but we have to think about what's going on for the Bucs injuries in a short turnaround too, because it was Jalen McMillan who suffered a hamstring injury late in the week last week, and Trey Palmer took his spot from the slot. But Trey Palmer, after his beautiful touchdown throw that Baker Mayfield just weaved in between coverage over the middle of the field, suffered a concussion as well. So it looks like we are now getting the bump for the second week in a row for Sterling Shepard, who logged 65% of the team snaps and 5 targets in that week 4 game. And it's not just about Sterling Shepard, but when you're looking at value picks on DraftKings, maybe you're playing DFS or trying to bet an overprop, I also think Cade Otton is someone who could sneak in. I know people are tired, for instance, of starting Kyle Pitts in this same game. I actually think Cade Otton is a better start because with those injuries in the wide receiver core for the Bucs, it opens the door for Otton to get there much easier. 17 targets now over the past 2 weeks, and he just doesn't come off the field ever. So I do think Otton is a better start than Kyle Pitts this week. And then moving over to the Falcons side of the ball, at least we know that although the Falcons secondary, again, as I mentioned, or the Bucs secondary, we know they've been sending the blitz a lot, but historically, Drake London has still had a lot of success against Todd Bowles. 10 catches for 172 yards, 6 catches for 54 yards and another 120 yards in his last 3 games against Bowls. So Drake London is the one here for the Falcons I'm having the most confidence in. You talked about all the bye weeks at the beginning, and especially at running back. That's where everyone's trying to find these players. And so beginning with these two backfields, it is interesting because I think Tyler Algier is someone who does become RB2 or 3 or flex worthy if you are desperate for what we've seen at least last week. Whenever the Falcons came out for the second half in that game last week, Bijan Robinson had a 1-yard carry. Then they put Tyler Algier on the field, and Algier had not only a 12-yard run, but a 13-yard catch. And from that point forward in the second half, Algier actually out-touched Bijan 8-2. After the game, Raheem Morris came out and said they were just going to ride the hot hand. And so there is this situation where Bijan still, you're never taking him out of your lineups because he's Bijan freaking Robinson. But there is a situation where maybe it becomes a hot hand again. And we should be projecting Algier for more touches than perceived. So I do like sneaking in Algier into lineups this week as well.
Love it. We have a Sunday morning game, John. It's the Jets and the Vikings, kind of a juicy one over across the pond. I believe it's in Tottenham. Your thoughts on Gangrene and the Purple People Eaters? I guess that was just the D-line like 30 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah, and still 2 very good D-lines, still 2 very good defenses right now. I do think it's an advantage for Garrett Wilson here because we show up to this show every single week and talk about how Brian Flores is just going to blitz your face off and you better do something against man coverage when he leaves your receivers on an island. But at least we know that Garrett Wilson has been targeted on 30% of his routes against man coverage. And that's really been the struggle here because right now in fantasy, everyone's frustrated. Wilson is the wide receiver 44 in points per game, not even startable in 3 wide receiver leagues so far. And it's just because everything has been played so much closer to the line of scrimmage with Aaron Rodgers getting the ball out quickly. Even against the blitz this year, Rodgers is only averaging 6.3 yards per attempt because his entire goal is not to get hit. He just wants to get rid of it quickly. But I still think that can benefit and give a higher floor than the past weeks we've seen from Garrett Wilson. So although, again, Alan Lazard has really matched Wilson to date, I still think I want to be higher on Wilson, at least for this spot, if you're waking up early and watching this one. For the backfield also, it's getting a little tough too because Breece Hall even mentioned after last week's contest against the Broncos that it really does seem like every time he touches the ball, opposing defenses are just on top of him. And in the last 2 games now, Breece Hall, 30 carries for 114 yards and a touchdown, and then Braylon Allen has rushed for 120 yards on his 23 carries. Braylon Allen has earned more touches moving forward, and that's hard just because that opportunity has to come from Breece Hall, one of the most explosive running backs in the league, but they've kind of shown that they're one of the best duos in the league as well. So again, if you are struggling just to pad for bye weeks or injuries right now at running back, I think Braylon Allen has done enough to also be a RB3 flex option in this game. On the other side of the ball, Sam Darnold at some point, like as amazing as he's been, in fantasy we work on regression and the numbers and is this sustainable? A 10.5% touchdown rate is not sustainable. At some point it comes back crashing to earth. But right now, everything's clicking for the Vikings offense. It's not just Sam Darnold, and yes, the Jets secondary has still been really good. No receiver has reached 80 yards yet through the first month of the season against the Jets. So, although we are still playing both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, their ceilings are concerning in this game. But where the Vikings have responded is Aaron Jones, because throughout the offseason, they mentioned that they are very wary of the injury history of Aaron Jones, and that's why they want to keep Ty Chandler involved. I think, though, Ross, through the first month of the season, Aaron Jones has been so good that they've really had no choice but to up his workload every week. Even going back to last week against the Packers, maybe it was because he was back at home, but a season-high 88% of their backfield touches. So it looks like Aaron Jones right now is just an every-down option, and when he's an every-down option, he's a fringe RB1 weekly. So although the tough spot, yes, I think Aaron Jones is just a must-play moving forward.
Yeah, that was so cool after the game, with all the Packers medical staff and all those people that he was with on the field. I love stuff like that. Absolutely love it. What about this matchup? Interesting one. It's the Carolina Panthers at the Chicago Bears.
I think it's the first true test for Andy Dalton, who did have some success late last week against the Bengals, but against this Bears secondary that still has my utmost respect from Matt Eberflus, no one has passed for more than one touchdown or over 260 yards against Chicago. And they have played some respectable names like CJ Stroud and Matthew Stafford along the way. So, although everyone knows to go right back to Deontay Johnson, 35% target share now the last 2 weeks from Dalton, compared to just a 22% share from Bryce Young, and their exciting first-round rookie, Xavier Legette, who did pop up last week too with a 25% target share, scored a touchdown, showed that he's more than worthy to pick up off waiver wires and start as a flex option as Adam Thielen's direct replacement. Just one fewer route than Deontay Johnson over the last 6 quarters, as they've just thrust him into the fire and let him do his magic. Again, it's still the toughest spot, though, for this Panthers offense, so I'm a little bit wary. On the other side of the ball, I think we finally got some confidence, though, in DeAndre Swift. The coaching staff had mentioned how they were going to shake up the backfield just to get something going. And although they oddly said Khalil Herbert's name, Khalil Herbert was the only running back without a touch last week for Chicago. Instead, they just shifted it all to DeAndre Swift. 23 touches to Roschon Johnson 7. Roschon did get the goal line carry, which is always concerning if we're trying to get to DeAndre Swift's ceiling. But just the fact that it was his best game, that beautiful 26-yard touchdown run where he lunged over a Rams linebacker. And although it was against the Rams defense, I think asking that question, like, was Swift good or was he good only because it's the Rams defense, is a moot point since he also gets this Panthers defense now. Already struggling to stop the run this year, but also in that game lost linebacker Shaq Thompson and Josie Jewell. Like, I don't even know who they're going to have to play in this front seven against this Bears offense that did make everything more downfield or more downhill to make life easier for Caleb Williams. So I think DeAndre Swift is someone we are getting much higher on, especially as a top 24 running back in this spot.
Love it. I'm very, very high on Labatt Blue Light. Anybody that looks at my social media or listens to any of the shows knows I like to drink Labatt Blue Lights with friends and live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Shout out to whoever on social media suggested that might be the best way for Christian McCaffrey's Achilles to heal, drinking some Labatt Blue Lights. That cracked me up. At Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. All right, what about the Ravens and that run game against the Bengals defense, which hasn't really stopped anybody yet the whole year, John?
And the best part about this one for fantasy is that the Bengals secondary, or the Ravens secondary, I should say, really hasn't stopped anyone either. That's why I'm excited. I expect this one to go over its 15.5 point total and probably score the most points of any game in week 5. Let's start with the Ravens offense, because what we've seen so far is basically no one get there in the passing game because they figured it out. Just 15 and 18 pass attempts for Lamar Jackson the past 2 weeks. And it's because they're having immense success whenever they go to 22 personnel with Patrick Ricard on the field as their fullback. And as you mentioned, that's how you beat the Bengals too. Chuba Hubbard, 104 yards and a touchdown against them. Both Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson scored rushing touchdowns. Pacheco had 90 rushing yards in week 2. And Ramondre Stevenson's best game of the year that we talked about, 120 yards and a touchdown, came in week 1 against this Bengals front 7. So I'm expecting the Ravens to just load it up yet again and move forward and bull rush with Derrick Henry. So I think another big game for Derrick Henry's coming. Not only that, but I know people are, like Kyle Pitts, very frustrated with Mark Andrews. And I don't know how we got here already in week 5 for a 29-year-old tight end who seemed to be past his injuries coming into week 1, but Mark Andrews is droppable. Like, we just have to treat the Ravens offense and Mark Andrews as they give to us. And what they're giving to us right now is not a passing unit, especially against this game in the Bengals and what we believe will be in next week's game against the Commanders. Mark Andrews is closer to a streamer whenever the Ravens have to pass the ball. And again, I don't think this is a situation where that's the game plan. So I'm looking to drop Mark Andrews. I will have suggestions for everyone to pick up over Andrews and Pitts in an upcoming game as well. On the other side of the ball, though, for the Bengals, as I mentioned, the Ravens are allowing the league's second highest completion rate, over 9 yards per attempt, on throws 10 yards downfield. That's how the Bengals want to play. They want to keep getting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins involved deep. T. Higgins, who popped up with a team-high target share just last week, clearly at full strength right now, bouncing back from his injury suffered during the preseason. So excited about Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense. Would love to say the same thing about the Bengals running backs. But one, not only are the Ravens have been a pass funnel and basically stuffing any running back they've played thus far, but more importantly, that it's become a committee all of a sudden with Zach Moss and Chase Brown splitting touches with each other just last week. Brown, who also showed so much juice before contact. So although Zach Moss is still being used as a pass catching back and at the goal line, we also saw Chase Brown get involved for a goal line touchdown too. Like the Bucs backfield, I think it's becoming more of a committee. I think it's a situation where you have to value Chase Brown just slightly less than Zach Moss. Thus, for people with bye weeks, it is a usage-based RB3 option for everyone trying to get by.
Okay, this next game I'm hoping is juicy. Another fantasy one for us to get excited about. Maybe you'll tell me differently, though. I don't know. It's the Bills in Houston to take on the Texans.
I am going to tell you differently. I'm torn on this one, though. That's the thing, because you see C.J. Stroud and you see Josh Allen, and you would think that we're going to get explosiveness and just lots of fantasy points. Unfortunately, one, that's not how the Texans have been playing under offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, where this goes back to last year, too, was always my problem with Bobby Slowick, is that, like Zach Taylor with the Bengals, he sets his offense up for failure almost, and too many rushing early downs that have proved to be inefficient, and thus the quarterback is forced with third and longs. And the Texans have actually averaged the longest third downs in the league so far, and it's because of these inefficient carries on first and second down. The thing is, it doesn't look bad because Bobby Slowick has C.J. Stroud. Like, C.J. Stroud is only a giver. He's a miracle worker. So, of course, people don't notice that they're actually being set up for some impossible third and long spots. The thing is, though, with C.J. Stroud as the QB 13 in points per game for fantasy, I think the Ravens, for this one, may have shown the blueprint to the rest of the league, and that if you load up with more tight ends, just some more bigger personnel, that's how you beat the Bills, because the Bills don't go 3-4 linebackers deep, especially without Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard still dealing with an injury. Like, they don't go 4 deep like a lot of other teams. And so I'm really worried, especially because it seems like we're getting Joe Mixon back for this game. Remember, Joe Mixon, 33 touches in week 1. I think the Texans could just load it up with Cade Stover and Dalton Schultz, make the Bills play more linebackers, and just run it down their throat instead. So, although we know Nico Collins has become a matchup-proof wide receiver 1 weekly, arguably a better option rest of season over Justin Jefferson. Everyone else, I really struggle to get there. Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver 3. We're getting Tank Dell back reportedly in this game, so we can keep buying low on him. But the matchup in general actually makes it better to where Joe Mixon is the play here, assuming he comes back. If not, Cam Akers has been their early down running back that I imagine they would lean on in this spot. For the Bills, too, it's been interesting under offensive coordinator Joe Brady because they just were unable to punch back against that Ravens defense last week. And it's because, like the Jets, they're still working so shallow to the line of scrimmage and asking their jumble of receivers to just create yards after the catch. So although Khalil Shakur keeps popping up and leading the team in targets, Keon Coleman also getting involved downfield, they're still searching for other options outside of Dalton Cade right now. The Texans secondary has been very good under D'Amico Ryans, so we're going to just trust the guys that we've historically leaned on in Kincaid and Khalil Shakir. But quite honestly, I'm worried that this is going to be a slower-paced game.
Smirnoff knows there's no I in football. Football is a we thing, an experience that is best enjoyed together with good drinks and good folks. Smirnoff's the world's #1 vodka and an official vodka partner of the NFL. And this year, Smirnoff is giving fans in select areas of the country a chance to win the ultimate game day experience, from tickets to sideline passes and much more. Just head to WeDoGameDays.com until November 15th to enter for your chance to win. Smirnoff, we do game days. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please do not share with anyone under legal drinking age. No purchase necessary. 21 plus. Ends 11/15/24. See rules at website for participating areas and other important details. Sponsored by Diageo Americas Incorporated, New York, New York. Don't miss the new Hulu original drama La Maquina, starring Diego Luna, Gael Garcia Bernal, and Asa Gonzalez. La Maquina is the first Spanish-language original series from Hulu. In their long-awaited on-screen reunion, Gael and Diego play lifelong friends, one a boxer and the other his crafty manager, making one last attempt at glory in the ring. But to make it to fight night, they must confront a mysterious underworld organization, raising the stakes to life or death. La Maquina premieres October 9th, streaming on Hulu. Yeah, that's interesting info about Bobby Slowick and the Texans for sure. Let's get to the Colts and the Jags. As a reminder, we record this Wednesday morning. What are we thinking right now about the quarterback for the Colts? And honestly, even though we know who he is, what are we thinking about the quarterback for the Jags, too?
Yeah. So let's start with the Colts because we want Joe Flacco in this game. This Jaguars secondary has been lit up by everyone but Deshaun Watson. And we'll talk about that later. You got to watch him in person. I'm sure you have takes from that game last week. But against the Jaguars this year, Tua averaged over 9 yards per attempt. Allen threw for 4 touchdowns. And Stroud, just last week, we talked about it, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns as well. And so if Joe Flacco's under center, Joe Flacco only played 3 quarters last week, basically, and was the QB 14. That's what he still can do at age 39 off the bench. It's actually incredible. And it's not only that, but the player he's leaned on the most so far is Josh Downs. I think that's the sleeper in this game because Josh Downs didn't debut due to his high ankle sprain until week 3. But over the last 2 games, he's been targeted on 36% of his routes, the 4th most among all receivers in the league. Not only that, but led the Colts with a 32% target share from Joe Flacco too. Whereas A.D. Mitchell, their explosive rookie, and Alec Pierce, who has seemed to be leaned on from the boundary with those deep shots from Anthony Richardson, whereas those 2 guys are really rotating with one another as the Colts figure out who their 3rd receiver is in 11 personnel. Josh Downs has the slot on lock, and then Michael Pittman's on the other side. So Pittman and Downs are 2 players to be very excited about against this Jaguars defense that is playing very poor, at least in the back. Not only that, but you mentioned we recorded this on Wednesday. We don't know about Jonathan Taylor either. And I think the default for everyone is to go to Trey Sermon, who has been their backup. But Trey Sermon is a journeyman for a reason and has only averaged 2.7 yards per carry. Where this Jaguars front 7 has been beat whenever they pop in fantasy points allowed is actually through the air. They've allowed 14.5 receiving points per game. They've been pretty stout against the run. Top 7 in yards per carry and rate of 10-yard runs against them. So I think Tyler Goodson for 14-team leagues is someone to at least keep in mind as their pass-catching back, and I'm somewhat skeptical. You can use him as a top 24 running back just for his touches, projected touches anyways, but I'm somewhat skeptical, admittedly, about Trey Sermon in this game, just stepping in based on a projection for Jonathan Taylor. Now, let's talk about the other side of the ball, because Trevor Lawrence is still a broken man. I don't think there's any way to help him out unless Doug Peterson takes over play calling for himself, which I believe we're probably getting closer to since Peterson's staring down the barrel of his job right now. And if you're going to go out, you might as well go out on your own terms, because right now Trevor Lawrence with a league low completion rate is just looking for any amount of help. And right now, the only receiver stepping up these last 2 weeks is both Christian Kirk and Brian Thomas. Thomas, who's still a very explosive option. So against this Colts secondary, that again, everyone is having immense success against as they continue to just lose players there, Kirk and Brian Thomas are worth trusting. The backfield, though, I know everyone continues leaning on Travis Etienne as a top 24 running back. Etienne has rushed for over 70 yards in one of his last 13 games. Tank Bigsby this year, and the only 2 games he's played 25% of their snaps, has rushed for over 70 yards in both of them. Bigsby this year has been the better option. And after Etienne suffered that shoulder injury last week, I am worried they start working him more and it becomes more of a timeshare. So Bigsby's someone to look out here for as a sleeper.
Last game we'll dive into here in episode 1. It's going to be the Dolphins and the Patriots. Gross.
It's gross. We're going to try to end this on a high note, though, because at least we know the Patriots secondary, despite having studs like Christian Gonzalez, they really still have struggled to do everything. 23rd in pressure rate. Quarterbacks are averaging the 8th most yards per attempt against them as well. Receivers keep getting there weekly, too. And so, at least for Tyler Huntley, although he's still learning the playbook, although that Monday night game, especially when the Lions and Seahawks is popping off, that Monday night game, I understand, was so disgusting. Tyler Huntley, because of the rushing floor, the skeleton key of fantasy football, still finished as the QB 20 in week 4. A top 24 option you could start in Superflex leagues because he had 8 carries for 40 yards and a rushing touchdown. So, although it's not pretty, I think the Patriots secondary is still weak enough to where with another week of the playbook under his belt, I am trusting Huntley in Superflex leagues and Tyreek Hill one more week. Jalen Waddle's still on the outside looking in as a thinner flex option who people probably still have to start given the impactful buys, the teams you mentioned at the top of the show that we're missing receivers for. But that's it right now. Devon Achane you can still keep using as a high floor option too, but right now with Raheem Mostert sounding like he's going to come back this game, it does get a little bit more concerning for everyone outside of Tyreek Hill. On another side of the ball, we've really only talked about Ramondre Stevenson every time we've touched on the Patriots, but Ramondre Stevenson had his 4th fumble in as many games last week. And from that point forward, he only out-touched Antonio Gibson 13-7. Jermichael Hasty even got involved with 3 carries after Stevenson's fumble. So if you sold high on Stevenson after week 1, congratulations, because it really does seem like Gibson may start getting more touches moving forward and create a backfield conundrum.
Love it. One show down, another one to go. Make sure you subscribe. It's a Fantasy Feast.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.